Hi friends, today we are going to discuss second part of the lecture titled Biochemical Techniques. The learning objectives of this lecture are X-ray diffraction analysis, flow cytometry, fluorochromes, fluorescent probe and working principle. Let's first discuss X-ray diffraction analysis. X-ray diffraction is a tool used for identifying the atomic and molecular structure of a crystal in which crystalline atoms cause a beam of incident X-ray to diffract into many specific directions. When a beam of X-rays illuminates a single crystal, many spots are generated. The position of the spots are determined by the size and the shape of unit cell and the symmetry. The intensities of the spots are determined by the arrangement of the atoms within the crystal. After measuring the intensities of all the diffraction spots, it is generally possible to determine the position of the atoms in the unit cell in a straightforward manner. The instrument used for X-ray diffraction. XRD analysis is based on the constructive interference of monochromatic X-rays and a crystalline sample. The X-rays are generated by a cathode ray tube filtered to produce monochromatic radiation, collimated to concentrate and directed towards the sample. The interaction of the incident rays with the sample produces constructive interference when conditions satisfy Bragg's law. This law relates the wavelength of an electromagnetic radiation to the diffraction angle and the lattice spacing in crystalline sample. The characteristic X-ray diffraction pattern generated in a typical XRD analysis provides a unique fingerprint of the crystals present in the sample. When properly interpreted by comparison with the standard reference patterns and measurements, this fingerprint allows identification of the crystalline form. The diffraction of X-rays by crystals was discovered in 1912 by a German physicist Leo and Friedrich and Nepping. These investigators directed a narrow beam of X-rays onto the stationary crystal with a F photographic plate behind. In 1913, Bragg and Wolf proposed a simpler diffraction pattern of X-rays by a crystal diffraction reflection. In the similar year, H. Bragg and L. Bragg determined first atomic structure of simple crystal via X-ray diffraction technique. Now, what are the applications of XRD analysis? First, coming to the qualitative phase analysis. Because the positions of the peaks in a powder pattern are determined by the size, shape and the symmetry of unit cell, the peak intensities are determined by the arrangement of the atoms within the cell. The powder pattern is characteristic fingerprint of a phase. Quantitative phase analysis is also done by XRD. As the concentration of the phase in a mixture varies, the intensities of all the peaks from this phase vary in concert ideally. Thus, the concentrations of the phases in a mixture can be determined by measuring the intensities of peaks in the powder pattern. XRD analysis can also determine ab initio crystal structure. Most crystal structures are determined using single crystal methods. Improvements in the data quality, algorithms and computer power make it increasingly possible to solve crystal structure using powder diffraction data. XRD can also analyze lattice parameter. Accurate and precise determination of lattice parameters of a solid solution can thus be used to carry out quantitative analysis at the microscopic scale. An example is the variation in the hexagonal lattice pattern of dolomite with magnesium content. XRD analysis can be done for microstructure analysis where the crystallite size and strain are determined. The width and the shape of the peaks in a powder pattern are determined by many factors, including contribution from diffractometer and specimen. Once the instrumental factors are understood by measuring a sample having no size or strain broadening, The crystallite size and the microstrain can be determined from experimental peak widths. XRD can also determine the texture. Non-random distributions of the crystallites, such as those resulting from platy or needle-like crystals or extruded and rolled specimens, can change the relative intensities of the diffraction peaks from a phase. These deviations from expected random intensities can be analyzed to derive the nature and the extent of preferred orientation, giving the texture in the material. Texture is often usualized by a pole figure, a map determined in the stereographic projection of a distribution of one particular vector in a crystal structure around the space. XRD can be used for the pair distribution function analysis as well in amorphous materials. The X-ray scattering from an amorphous material leads to broad features in the powder pattern. These features can be analyzed using old mathematics like the Debye function or more rigorously using new approaches and high energy synchrotron or neutron diffraction. Now coming to our next topic, which is flow cytometry. Flow cytometry is the measurement of cells in a flow system which delivers cells singly past a point of measurement. In this method, light is focused at the point of measurement. The scattered light and fluorescence of different wavelengths are then recorded. Typically, light scatters at two different angles, and from 1 to 6 or more fluorescences will be measured. The first impedance based flow cytometry device was disclosed in 1953 to Wallace H. Coulter. Then Mach was the inventor of the forerunner to the today's flow cytometers, particularly the cell sorter. The first fluorescence based flow cytometry device, ICP-11, was developed in 1968 by Wolfgang. Fluorescent chemicals may be used to label cell components such as DNA directly. Others are attached to antibodies against a wide variety of cellular proteins. The value of this technique lies in the ability to make measurements on large number of a single cells within a short period of time. The heterogeneity of the population can be revealed and different subsets of cells identified and quantified. Selected cell populations can also be physically sorted for further study. The major disadvantage of flow cytometry is that it requires a suspension of single cell or other particles with minimum clumps and debris. This means that the tissue architecture and any other information about the spatial relationship between the different cells are lost when single cells or nuclei are prepared. Friends, I will demonstrate the basic building blocks of flow cytometer. It includes the flow chamber. The flow chamber lies at the heart of the instrument. This is often called a flow cell. It is designed to deliver cells in a single file at the point of measurement. The sample is injected into the center of stream of liquid, either water or buffer, called the sheath fluid, narrowed to the sample stream with a diameter of 10 micrometer, constraining the cells to move through the center of the chamber. And at this point, light is focused. There are two types of the basic flow chambers: fully closed chambers, which are used for the analysis only, and chambers in which sample stream emerges into the open air, used for analyzing and sorting the cells. A collecting lens attached to the chamber maximizes the amount of fluorescence and the scattered light collected. The next component of flow cytometry is fluidics. Typically, the sheath fluid is driven through the flow chamber by an air pressure supplied by a compressor. The same pressure is used to force a sample into the sheath. Some systems deliver the sample by means of a syringe pump. Now, most important component of the flow cytometry, which is the light source. The light source used in flow cytometry is blue or argon ion laser that passes through a focusing lens. On the far side of a flow chamber is a bar which blocks the laser beam. The forward scatter detector sits behind the blocker bar and detects light scatter at small angles in a forward direction. A collecting lens is placed at right angles to the laser beam. Flow cytometer has another component called as detector. A solid state detector is sufficient for the measurement of forward scattered light. For measuring fluorescence and scatter at the right angles to the laser beam, photomultipliers can be used. The signals from the detector are sent to the processing called as signal processing. In more modern machines, the signals are converted from analog to digital at an early stage and all subsequent processing is handled digitally. Cell sorting is the prime function of flow cytometry. Now I will briefly discuss before you the methods of cell sorting. There are two methods of sorting cells using a flow cytometer. The commonest method is electrostatic deflection of charged droplets, and alternative methods use piezoelectric devices to sort the cells mechanically. Cell sorting can be done by deflection of the charged droplets. A conductive sheath fluid is used. The flow chamber is vibrated vertically by means of a piezoelectric transducer at a frequency usually between 20 and 60 kHz. This vibration causes fluid emerging from the exit nozzle, typically 75 micrometer diameter, to break up into droplets. Sorting of cells can be accomplished mechanically. In some sorters, separation of the desired population is achieved by deflecting cell out of the mainstream using piezoelectric device. This method can be used for sorting large particles such as protoplasts because it avoids the limitations of size imposed by the need for accurate droplet formation in the electrostatic sorters. Our next topic illustrates the application of fluorochromes in flow cytometry. Now let us discuss fluorochromes and flow cytometry. When a compound absorbs light, its energy raises the electrons from the ground state to an excited state. Electrons then return to the ground state by a variety of transitions which may involve the emission of a quantum of light called as radiative transition. This effect is termed as fluorescence. Fluorescence detection is a sensitive technique because a positive signal is observed against a negative background. The detection of up to 14 compounds fluorescing at different wavelengths permits multiparametric analysis of cells and has greatly increased the power of flow cytometry. The important properties of fluorochromes are its absorption spectrum, its extinction coefficient at a wavelength convenient for excitation, and its emission spectrum and its quantum efficiency. The difference between the maxima in the wavelengths of absorption and emission is known as the Stokes shift. The higher the Stokes shift, the greater the separation between the exciting and the emitted light. The properties of fluorochrome will depend on its environment. For example, propydium iodide, which is used to stain DNA, is only weakly fluorescent in water, but on intercalating with the DNA, the fluorescence increases 50-fold due to the hydrophobic environment. Some fluorochromes such as fluorescein are sensitive to pH. There are other compounds whose fluorescence spectrum changes according to the concentration of certain ions such as calcium. In general, there are two classes of fluorochromes used in flow cytometry: those which bind non-covalently to the structures within the cell and those which are covalently bound to other probes. The fluorescent proteins such as green fluorescent protein form a special category. They are used as reporter molecules when introducing a gene construct into a cell. The probe used is commonly an antibody, but other proteins such as lectin, hormone, avidin or even cDNA may be labeled. The largest application of labeled protein is for its immunofluorescence. The most common fluorochrome used to label proteins is fluorescein isothiocyanate. The isothiocyanate group reacts with the amino group on the lysine residues in the protein. The number of labeled proteins that can be used has been greatly extended by the use of the tandem dyes. Our last topic is fluorescent probe and its working principle. Fluorescent probes are molecules that absorb light of specific wavelength and emit the light of different, typically longer wavelengths. The process is called as fluorescence and is used to study biological samples. The molecules, also known as fluorophores, can be attached to the target molecule and act as a marker for analysis with fluorescence microscopy. The purpose of fluorescent probe such as fluorochrome conjugated antibody is to directly target an epitope of interest and to allow its biological and biochemical properties to be measured more easily by flow cytometer. Fluorescent probes are useful in a wide range of applications, including identifying and quantifying distinct populations of cells, cell surface receptors or intracellular organelles, cell sorting and immunophenotyping. Calcium influx experiments determining nucleic acid content, measuring the enzyme activity and for apoptosis studies. By changing the excitation light and using more than one fluorochrome, it is possible to analyze several parameters of a sample at one time. This forms the basis of multicolor fluorescence studies. Among their myriad of the uses, fluorescent probes are employed to detect protein location and activation and identify the protein complex formation and conformation changes and monitor the biological processes in vivo. Fluorescence probes are essentially the molecular stopwatches which monitor dynamic events which occur during the excited state lifetime, such as movements of the proteins or protein domains. Now coming to its working principle. A fluorescent probe is a fluorophore designed to respond to specific stimulus or to localize within a specific region of a biological specimen. The process responsible for the fluorescence of fluorescent probes and other fluorophores is illustrated by the simple electronic state diagram as described in 3 steps. Stage first, excitation. A photon of energy is supplied by an external source such as an incandescent lamp or a laser and absorbed by the fluorophore, creating an excited electronic singlet state. This process distinguishes fluorescence from chemiluminescence, in which excited state is propagated by a chemical reaction. And coming to the second stage, excited state lifetime. The excited state exists for finite time, typically 1 to 10 nanoseconds. During this time, the fluorophore undergoes conformation changes and also subject to multitude of possible interactions with its molecular environment. Coming to the last stage, that is the fluorescence emission. A photon of energy is emitted, returning the fluorophore to its ground state. Due to the energy dissipation during the excited state lifetime, the energy of this photon is lower, therefore of longer wavelength than the excitation photon. The difference in the energy or the wavelength is represented in terms of Stokes coefficient. The Stokes coefficient is fundamental to the sensitivity of fluorescence techniques because it allows emission photons to be detected against a low background, isolated from the excitation photons. In contrast, absorption spectrophotometry requires the measurement of transmitted light related to high incident light levels at the same wavelength. Fluorescence spectra. The entire fluorescence process is cyclic. Unless the fluorophore is irreversibly destroyed in the excited state, an important phenomenon known as photobleaching, the same fluorophore can be repeatedly excited and detected. The fact that a single fluorophore can generate many thousands of detectable photons is fundamental to the high sensitivity of fluorescence detection techniques. Four essential elements of fluorescence detection system can be identified from preceding discussion. First, an excitation light source, a fluorophore, wavelength filters to isolate the emission photons from the excitation photons, and a detector that registers the emission photons and produces a recordable output, usually as an electrical signal. Regardless of the application, compatibility of these four elements is essential for optimizing fluorescence detection. Fluorescence intensity is quantitatively dependent on same parameters as absorbance, defined by Beer-Lambert law as the product of molar extinction coefficient, optical path length and solute concentration, as well as on the fluorescence quantum yield of the dye and excitation source intensity and fluorescence collection efficiency of the instrument. With this, I conclude today's lecture. Hope you have understood the lecture. Thank you.